let's carry that over into some cricket yarns here, Wildcard. The Black Caps absolutely wiped the floor of the West Indies, and I wrote about this morning, just trying to balance the enjoying what we are watching, because it is fun cricket. Like, it's good Kiwi cricket. We've got good Kiwi cricketers. They're doing fun things. They're winning cricket games. It's all part of the summer package in New Zealand, and like it is really fun. These guys are playing cricket, test cricket, at a super high level. They are dominating basically anyone who comes to New Zealand. At the same time, and I don't want to be like, because we do have a somewhat cynical nature with cricketing matters in New Zealand, so it's less about that in my mind, and it's more about we cannot pretend as though there is a huge discrepancy, not necessarily or solely in results, but in simply the amount of games that are played in New Zealand and elsewhere. And I do want, like, as I explored this and writing about it this morning, you realize like how everything has been set up basically perfectly for New Zealand cricket with the Black Caps test schedule. They basically haven't toured anywhere overseas. Like, they played a series in UAE. They won that series, which is impressive. Like, shout out to them. Even a drawn series in Sri Lanka last year was pretty impressive. Like, those are good markers of a really solid Black Caps team, is that they can go to the complete opposite conditions of dry, spinning tracks, and they can win and also not get beaten. Because like a drawn series in Sri Lanka, regardless of how strong Sri Lanka is, like, a drawn series is still respectable. 1-1, you win a test, you lose a test, that's solid. Like, I like that. I obviously like defeating Pakistan in the UAE. And then their third, I think it was third, they had 3 overseas trips, overseas series, since the start of 2017, maybe 2016. Let me just double check this. Yeah, so basically the start of 2017, so 2016-17, since then New Zealand have played 3 test series overseas over the course of basically 3 summers, 3 to 4 years. There have only been 3 test series played by the Black Caps outside of New Zealand. At the same time, England have made 2 trips to New Zealand. West Indies have made 2 trips to New Zealand. And I think the other one is Bangladesh have made 2 trips to New Zealand for test series. So England, West Indies, and Bangladesh have almost played as many tests in New Zealand since the start of 2017 as New Zealand has played anywhere else in the world, except for New Zealand. So we're dealing with this like super enjoyable, successful period of Black Caps test cricket. The Test Match Championship is a bit better reflection of where New Zealand is at right now, because it's a bit more recent, so there is a bit more, like, it includes the series in Sri Lanka, it includes the series in Australia, so there's a good balance there. But especially the test rankings, like that, let alone all the individual statistics, the Black Caps team success, all of that is like compiled together as a means to explain that New Zealand's one of the best test nations in the world, which they might be, but at the same time, we cannot ignore the fact that this has been about as easy a schedule as anyone has experienced in test cricket. Like, they literally very rarely play test cricket outside of New Zealand, while all these other teams are making multiple trips to New Zealand, which is known as a really difficult place to tour cricket-wise, let alone in right now, Wildcard, this has to be mentioned as well, because West Indies and Pakistan have both had minor brushes with the isolation rules and regulations while in New Zealand, which is a reflection of all the travel and bullshit they've had to put up with just to play cricket, whereas the New Zealand cricket team just stays in New Zealand. They don't have to go through, different players have to go through the isolation quarantine, but as a team, the Black Caps test team doesn't have to. So I just find it like it's such a balancing act, and I've mentioned balance when talking about this for the last few weeks, but I've come to like a real clear thing. Like, yes, we can celebrate this Black Caps test team, but at the same time, we have to recognize that this is an incredibly, like, relatively speaking to the other nations, 3 nations who have toured New Zealand twice during this period, relative to the test cricket world, this is a super easy period of games for New Zealand. And now, more recently, like West Indies, I'm not necessarily so in tune with this New Zealand A series, because like I just feel for the West Indians. Like they've got this West Indian A team who are playing games and have had to go through all their travel. They played in England, had to go through a whole bubble experience with that. Like, it would be a nightmare for them. And then Pakistan is going through something similar while the Black Caps are just chilling. They don't have to go through this whole ordeal as well. So I can kind of see that New Zealand will sweep Pakistan just as they swept the West Indies. So it's a weird time where, on the one hand, this Black Caps team's really good. Like, I wrote down various stats that just reflect, like, this was the best year of Tim Southee's career, bowling wise. And 2018 and 2020 are the 2 best years of Tim Southee's test bowling career. You can throw up any statistic. You can, like, Kane Williamson, amazing. Henry Nicholls scored runs. All of that stuff is great. At the same time, I think the key messaging from the niche case, depending on how you feel about this wildcard, the key message with regards to Black Caps test cricket is that, and this is another idea, like I don't know if it's by design or just like purely coincidence, but has been very, very comfortable. The Black Caps have not had to, whether it's just the strictly 2020 COVID pandemic stuff or the rigors of international test cricket over the last 3 to 4 years, the Black Caps simply have not had to endure what other nations have had to endure. Like, it's not a level playing field at all. So we just have to keep that in mind. And yes, we can celebrate the Black Caps. Yes, they are, the best test team in the world. Yes, they are competing for, test championship final at Lords. Yes, like all these records. Yes, all these players are amazing. However, this is the most comfortable period of Black Caps test cricket, and also a period that has resulted, or has like been focused on test cricket in New Zealand. So it's all just, everything is perfectly designed for Black Caps test cricket success. And I'll throw it to you. The only thing we're looking for now with Black Caps test cricket is, when's their next overseas test series? That's the only time we're going to like truly gauge who and what this Black Caps test cricket group is in the wider context of international cricket.
Affirmative, yeah. It's not an easy one to, like, there's a lot of talk in the media over the last few days about this whole, like, would the Black Caps go top of the ICC rankings? And then a lot of people were saying they would, and then suddenly ICC's like, well, actually you're like 0.05 points behind Australia or whatever. And then a bunch of people being upset at this, where it's like, I don't want to be ranked ahead of Australia on the ICC test rankings right now. Like, I don't actually want that to be the case, because we played them about a year ago and got absolutely demolished. And obviously some, like, extenuating circumstances there with a few players injured, and you just can't rock up to Australia with injured to start and injured like as the series went along. It's just people kept getting injured, and you just can't rock up to Australia under strength and expect to be competitive. You got to have things going your way, especially at the moment where Australia really seem to be turning the corner back into being such an excellent, just like standard bearing Test match cricket team. And it just wouldn't. It would feel hollow to be ranked ahead of Australia right now in the wake of that, because it would show that the rankings are, as we know this to be the case, the rankings don't really matter. The rankings don't follow you out onto the field to play your next game or anything like that. They're just sort of like an arbitrary way of putting things together. But it would be a little bit farcical if we were ahead of Australia, having just been absolutely demolished by them head to head in a 3-match series, losing all 3 of them. I'm looking at the thing with like their last however many, lost 3-0 to Australia. Before that, it was the 1-1 draw in Sri Lanka, which is decent result, but at the same time, like, I think the Black Caps would have felt like they could have at least, like, they lost the first test and then they bounced back really well to win the second test, but losing the first test felt like one of those kind of, like, travel circumstances that you're mentioning. Like, I think that was the first time they played after the World Cup, and they just maybe, like, weren't, like, it just took them a game to get going properly, and they... that's still a regrettable one as far as the Test Championship goes. It's their first Test Match Championship game, and to lose that one and drop those points is a little bit of an opportunity they can't get back. And before that, it's a bunch of in New Zealand. There is the Pakistan series in the UAE, won that 2-1. That is technically a neutral ground series, though. I mean, it's like in effect, Pakistan have been playing all their Test matches in the UAE, so it's not really. But it's still like away with an asterisk. New Zealand and India lost 3-0, 2016-17. New Zealand and South Africa lost 1-0 in 2 Test matches. Beat Zimbabwe in a couple. New Zealand and Australia lost 2 out of 3 and drew the other one. Like, there's not a lot going. Like, it's beyond that point, like you're talking 5 years ago, if you go much further. So you can't necessarily compare that to the current team as it is now, because a lot has changed. As you say, like Tim Southee's, he's at arguably the best form he's had in his entire career. Neil Wagner has never slowed down. Kyle Jamison's burst onto the scene. Henry Nicholls is a much better batsman than he was back then. Tom Latham has established himself even more. Like, Kane Williamson certainly hasn't got any worse. Ross Taylor is only getting better as well himself in the latter stages of his career. I'm sure sure that won't be the last time we mention his name in this podcast. But like, yeah, you can't go much further back than that. But at the same time, like, they've done nothing apart from that UAE series, really. Like, even the Sri Lanka series felt like a missed opportunity more than a great result. Like, the second test was a great result to bounce back and win, but also, like, if they just drawn that first one or something, I don't know. Like, there was, at the very least, it wasn't a series where, like, the Black Caps were expected to lose. It was expected to be competitive, because playing Test matches away from home is really, really difficult. It's the hardest thing in the sport. And the Black Caps haven't done a lot of that, and they haven't actually won a lot away from home when they have. And it's the same kind of thing that you get with the Black Caps, where they're just like, it's not them, it's the way that they're covered. It's the way that, like, fans talk about them, and the way that the media represents them. And there's this, almost more than any other team, except, I suppose you could say the All Blacks get it the worst of all, this kind of recency bias aspect, where if the All Blacks lose one game, it's the end of the world. So that's maybe just a different, a unique circumstance there. With the Black Caps, because they play a lot of their cricket, getting the biggest focus over the home summer, and it's kind of like, it's not just a sporting thing, it's almost like a cultural thing, having the summer of cricket and whatever, built into people's identities and what their, like, summer plans and whatever. Chuck the radio on, or chuck the telly on, or watch the cricket in the morning, then go play on the, grab a bat and a ball and go repeat the dose on the beach or in the backyard or whatever afterwards. It's almost like a factor of people's identities. That's the focus that gets the like that's when everyone is talking about the Black Caps, and then if they, which they haven't been doing recently, there've been at least 2 years of the last 4 where I don't think they've even had a winter tour. But when they do go away on their winter tours, it's often happening overnight or whatever, or it's just not in as stark a focus, and it's just like that stuff gets slept on a little bit more, even though that's like the real test of character when it comes to like everything that they've done in these 15 test matches in a row at home, undefeated, is fantastic. All that does in terms of where they stand globally on any kind of arbitrary rankings is just makes it nice and tantalizing to think of, like, because this is an excitement thing. This isn't a criticism of being like, oh, they haven't done it away from home, so we can't put them in that top echelon. It's like, no, they haven't really even had an opportunity away from home, which makes that really exciting to think when they do get to like put this top strength team to action in an away series, just how much fun that might be, because we haven't seen that yet. We don't know exactly how that might look. The Australian series was compromised, obviously, plus it's just really, really difficult to beat Australia in general, even if they did have their best players. But like, how would we go if we were playing in England coming up? If we were, there's meant to be a series back in August in Bangladesh, they got postponed, maybe cancelled. I don't know what they're going to do with that. For the Test Championship, like, that would have been a really tough test. Bangladesh in Bangladeshi conditions. That's Bangladesh over here is one thing. Bangladesh in Bangladesh, very different prospect. Like, those kind of tours. If we could go to the West Indies and play them in their conditions, South Africa would be a really fun place to tour. Right? Like, the thought of this team going on those tours is very exciting because it feels like we could be competitive in a way that we haven't really been in the past. We just haven't had the chance to see it yet, right? Like, that's the problem. It's just we haven't had the opportunity to see what this team at this level might be able to achieve. But it's also true to say that until they do that, you can't be calling them the top test match team in the world or anything like that. And if any rankings suggest that they are, then those rankings are just wrong.
Yeah, roger that. And that's I guess the takeaway from this West Indian series sets up what we're talking about, because the takeaways from the West Indian series is that this might be, and I think we talked about this last week after the first test, this feels like the strongest test group of this period that we're talking about, like last 3 to 4 years, because like the best way to frame it is you don't just have Kyle Jamieson's batting and or bowling, which are both quite skillful, as we've seen. It's the fact that Kyle Jamieson's presence, like, that's the latest development, is Kyle Jamieson. So that's the thing that's taken this team to the next level. But it's based around his presence and what that does for the makeup of your team, because you can take this Black Caps test team and play Kyle Jamieson ahead of Daryl Mitchell and Colin de Grandhomme, and then you can also fit a spinner in. Alternatively, you can continue to play Kyle Jamieson as an all-rounder, and maybe in certain conditions you can take out Neil Wagner, and then you can play with 2 spinners and still have 3 decent seamers. Like, there's just the presence of Kyle Jamieson and what he has shown us throughout 2020, because we go back to the India series earlier this year, he was equally as fantastic. His skill set, and then what he, like, the doors he opens and the options he makes available. When I'm thinking about how this Black Caps test team can be competitive around the world against anyone, the presence of Kyle Jamieson is what makes me excited about the prospects of the Black Caps test team in that, international context. There's bits and pieces with the batting, BJ Watling has shown that, like, he's still got another couple years. Like, he still looks at ease in Test cricket, so he's going to be there. So you're kind of, whether you view Tom Blundell as the best opener right now, maybe that's Will Young. Either way, I still think that's the best possible team. because we can't throw up any other names that haven't played Test cricket because they haven't done the job in Test cricket. And even in saying that, like, the batting lineup is so strong. Tom Latham, Kane Williamson, Ross Taylor, Henry Nicholls, Kyle Jamieson, BJ Watling, Tim Southey, like, let alone if you want to inject Mitchell Santner in and his all-round skills, like, whatever you want to do, the batting lineup is still strong that you're basically only carrying one batsman who's a bit dubious, whether that's Tom Blundell, whether it's Will Young, like dubious in the Test match arena. So it just feels like that's the best Test group that I've basically followed in my life. Like, I don't think I've felt this confident about a Black Caps Test team. But until they play overseas, like, we're never going to feel that satisfaction. We're never going to get that fulfillment of the seam attack in operation in South Africa, in England, or the balance on offer. So you can still have an almighty Test team with a couple spinners, so that puts you in a great position to tour India, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, UAE, West Indies. So it's a strange situation. I will touch on Henry Nicholls because I need to shout out Henry Nicholls because there was even we talked about it a wee bit. There was a fair amount of talk about his lack of Test match runs. However, he's had a fantastic period of cricket outside of Test cricket. Like, he was the best batsman in the ODI series against India. Didn't do too much in the Test series against India. Last summer in the Ford Trophy, he played 3 games, had a century and 250s or something like that. And then in the Plunket Shield, like this summer leading into this Test series, he had an 87 in the Plunket Shield, 76 in a tour game against the West Indians, and then a 43 not out with a strike rate of 107 in the Ford Trophy. So Henry Nicholls has been fantastic, whatever format you want to put him in, and he just finally broke that statistical hump in Test cricket. This flows, so there's that idea of basically everyone in New Zealand is celebrating the Black Caps, and there's that's the agenda, or not agenda, but that's the yarn that we're seeing around the various traps of New Zealand sport, and just celebrate. That's where I feel our duty is to also suggest that, like, to also point out that the various factors have been hugely in favour of the Black Caps, just to keep it real. Then we come to this Black Caps Test T20 squad to face Pakistan, and there is, the key headline is Ross Taylor's dropped. Now, we've been here before, and this time around, statistically, there's a decent case for Ross Taylor not playing these T20 fixtures. We're going to get a bit excessive on defending the Ross Taylor because we did it back maybe 2017. We went deep in support of Ross Taylor against the regime, and we're going to do it again. But this time it's a bit different because this T20 squad against Pakistan is clearly taking the piss. So how can we put any weight on Ross Taylor not being there when Ross Taylor's playing Test cricket? He's just played 2 tests against the West Indies. Straight after these T20s against West Indies, he's got 2 tests to play against Pakistan as well. So you could just say Ross Taylor's having a break. And then Gavin Larson comes out with all this shit about Ross Taylor, like we're looking at other players. All he needed to say was Ross Taylor deserves a break. Happy days. Like, it's all good. Because when you look at the T20 squad, for 3 T20 games, they named like 18 or 19 players, which is clearly taking the piss. And that's all good, because what are we doing? We're trying to suss out T20 combinations ahead of these 2 T20 World Cups, and we need to finalize our best T20 unit, so I've got no issues with giving a wide range of players an opportunity. But it needs to be presented that way. And then, you've got Todd Astle coming out of nowhere just to like be included in the T20 squad, and he's done literally nothing. So it's like there's just so many factors that makes this clearly a bit of taking the piss. Like there's so many other things happening here that you can just see right through what is happening and know that they're just trying different combinations. They're chucking different people in, and they're just going to give them an opportunity, regardless of whether they thoroughly deserve that opportunity or not. I'm not going to sit here and break down why this player should be selected ahead of this player. That's not what's important right now. What is important right now is casting a big net, bringing that net in tight for the best T20 group for this back-to-back T20 World Cup period of international cricket. Yeah, in no way was that the vibe. Any media reported on it, like whether it's the Cricinfo headline is Ross Taylor dropped, let alone the yarns that were thrown out in the New Zealand media, let alone Gavin Larson saying Ross Taylor misses out because quality and form of the rest of the squad. You've named like 20 players for 3 games. That's not why Ross Taylor's not there. He's not there because you're taking the piss. Like it's a very strange. On the one hand, it's so clear, and I'll write about this tomorrow, so hopefully be able to, flesh this out in the written format. On the one hand, it's so clear what's happening, but the way New Zealand cricket and the way the media is presented makes it seem very different to what is actually happening.
But what is actually happening? Because the taking the piss thing is true, but like Gavin Larson just straight up, I watched it live, like stood there next to Craig McMillan and I think it was Brendan McCullum or something, and on the Spark Sport coverage, and straight up said like, we've not picked Ross Taylor for performance-based reasons. That it's like, yeah, we've been here before. It's why this is so stupid. It was Gavin Larson last time as well, saying like, we've dropped him. He'd just come back from his eye surgery, and they're like, no, we want him to play Super Smash. We've picked a team based on who we think are the players who could like, and you had the most obvious excuse in the world back then, whenever it was, 2016, 2017, I can't remember, it might have been actually the summer of the both of them, did like the most obvious excuse in the world. He's just had eye surgery. You just say, well, he's not ready yet. And then you don't have to, like that's how you treat a senior player when you don't pick them. You come up with some dumb excuse and say that they're injured, or in this case, the most obvious excuse in the world, we're resting him. I mean, they don't say that Kane Williamson, Daryl Mitchell, Kyle Jamieson, Tim Southee, Trent Bolt. You're not saying that those guys have dropped for game 1. You say, no, we're giving them a rest because they've just played in a test match, and presumably Taylor would have been in the same boat. Wouldn't have been considered for game 1, but would have come back in for game 2 and 3. Mitchell Santner is captaining them in game 1 and then having a rest in games 2 and 3. Mitchell Santner's not dropped though, and the old mate's not coming out there and saying like, well, we just think Ish Sodhi and Todd Astle offer a better balance to the team, and their performances mean that we don't think, well, you can't say anything about Todd Astle's performances because he hadn't done anything. He only just popped up in this current summer a couple of weeks ago because he doesn't play red ball cricket anymore. Where he's come from, I have no idea. He's like the horse just makes a mad gallop over the last lap and suddenly like surges up on everyone, and where did this bugger come from? But no one's out there saying Mitchell Santner's been dropped for games 2 and 3, so he's having a rest. Like, you could have just said Ross Taylor's having a rest. Kane Williamson, Trent Bolt, they weren't dropped for the last, the West Indies 2020 series. They were having a rest. Like, I just don't, this is what I don't understand, is because I don't agree with it, but I can see the case for saying Ross Taylor isn't in your first 11. I repeat again, I don't agree with it. I think if you're going to pick based on form in recent years, Ross Taylor's ahead of Tim Seifert, so why don't you just give the gloves to Devon Conway and say, this is our best batting lineup? If you're so insistent on picking Phillips and Conway, which, by the way, is a really exciting thing, and there's nothing wrong with that. And if you want to pick Williamson in there as well, there you go. But I think Williamson, just personally, like if I was putting together a batting lineup, it's Williamson and Guptill opening. It's Conway and then Phillips, probably in that order. Then you have Taylor, then you have, say, Neesham, etc. Conway or Phillips can both wicket keep. Both of them have done it at first class level, I'm pretty sure. So I don't see an issue there, considering that the Black Caps have never been ones to shy away from the so-called like part-time wicket keepers. Tom Latham wasn't a wicket keeper full-time, and now he is their ODI wicket keeper. BJ Watling wasn't a wicket keeper, and now he's top 10 all-time in test match dismissals. So that's never been a hurdle that's held them back in the past, especially because when you think about it, I think wicket-keeping almost matters the least in 2020s. It's obviously an important skill set regardless, but you're going to have fewer catches. Maybe, I guess you'll be in the mix with stumpings a little bit more, maybe. So maybe that's not fair to say, but like fewer balls are going through to the wicketkeeper. You're a little less involved. It's only 20 overs, so it's not as tiring. Someone like Glenn Phillips, who has a bit of a dodgy kneecap, for example, maybe would have, like, you don't really want him wicket keeping for that reason. Devon Conway, I'm sure, would be fine, and I don't think it would affect him mentally, because we've seen from Devon Conway already in his very brief international stint that he's one of the most unfazed people on the planet. So I don't think he's got a drama if he had to also carry the gloves. But yeah, just the way that's been handled, like you can make the argument that Ross Taylor wouldn't be in your top 5 because you're trying to pick a team that does a certain amount of stuff with the batting lineup. You want power hitting in the middle. You want guys who can turn the strike over heaps through those middle overs and put together partnerships, hit boundaries all around the park. I'm pretty sure Ross Taylor can do all those things, but if you say that others can do them better, I can accept that. What I don't accept is just the chucking him under the bus like that and saying why not just say he's been dropped? I don't understand that, because every other senior player has been given that that little what do you call it, like little landing pad, the safety net of that. Like, you can also make a case that, again, wouldn't agree with this, but you can make the case that maybe Kane Williamson isn't in the best 11 for a 2020 team because maybe his strike rate just isn't quite up there, or maybe Trent Bolt is not even. It just, for a while there, it seemed a little bit sacrilegious to say Trent Bolt wouldn't be playing, but the strength of the New Zealand cricketing scene at the moment means that guys like Trent Bolt shouldn't be automatic selections in all 3 formats of the game. They need to earn those selections. And I was thinking about this watching the test stuff. Like, if you did want to drop one of those 4-seamers to pick, like in an away series in, I don't know, in India or whatever, and you wanted to pick another spinner, maybe you want to pick 2 spinners. You drop the all-rounder, pick a spinner, and you want to drop one of the 4-seamers to pick a spinner. It might actually be Trent Bolt who would be the guy to step, like it has been Tim Southee in the past, but Tim Southee's bowling better than Trent Bolt at the moment in test matches, and doesn't mean Trent Bolt's bowling badly. It just means that then also Neil Wagner is the guy who maybe is going to give you a wicket out of nothing. Kyle Jamieson gives you the best batting of any of that quartet. Maybe it's Trent Bolt who would actually have to step aside and sit one out for a second spinner to come in. Like, that's not out of the question right now. And if that's not out of the question in the test match scene, then it certainly shouldn't be in the 2020 scene. So why is he not dropped? Why is he just rested when it matters and Ross Taylor is dropped? I just don't understand that, mate. I just don't see why you wouldn't treat your most senior player, who's played over 100 times in this format in internationals, played over 100 times in all 3 formats in internationals. I'm pretty sure still the only player on the planet who's ever done that. I just don't understand why you wouldn't at least shield him from that kind of backlash and having to deal with Cricinfo headlines of being dropped in New Zealand Herald and stuff, headlines of Ross Taylor dropped for 2020 series. Like, they don't say that if you just come and say, well, he's having a rest because we want to try some other options out. That's all you got to do. It baffles me why that isn't the case for that, especially when, like, you're going to have Mitchell Santner as the captain in the first game. He's not even going to play the next 2 games. Like, that's another example of piss taking. And to not extend that kind of, that friendliness to Ross Taylor is absolutely baffling.
I was I was baffled that USA superstar Corey Anderson wasn't selected. That's how crazy that was. Did you know Ross Taylor's wife played for Northern Districts? Victoria Brown. 44
Did not know
games for Northern Districts. So shout out to her. I've got a couple notes here for you, Wildcard. Todd Astle, one of the best T20 cricketers in Aotearoa. Last year's Super Smash. Granted, he only played 2 games. 8 overs, 1 wicket, 48 runs conceded. Average of 48. Not crash hot. Last year's Ford Trophy. These are all white ball formats. Todd Astle, 10 wickets at average of 38. Not crash hot. Not terrible. Not crash hot. And then this year's Ford Trophy, which is currently in action with every time we record these podcasts, it's a Tuesday, which means there's a round of Ford Trophy games happening. Beautiful little routine. This year's Ford Trophy, Todd Astle, 4 wickets, average of 51. So the last 3 tournaments of white ball cricket that Todd Astle has played in, he has averaged 38 or higher / worse. And that earns you selection. So shout out to Todd Astle. Big it up to him. And when this happened with Ross Taylor last time, Wildcard, what did Ross Taylor do in the Super Smash?
He committed blue murder, didn't he? From memory, he just pummeled the ball all over the park.
2 games and two half centuries. I'll try and pull up the Cricinfo version of this, just so you can get strike rates and stuff like that. Highest score, 82 not out, 162 runs in 2 games of Super Smash cricket, and he scored... oh my gosh. Ross Taylor had a strike rate of 178 in his 2 Super Smash games.
Jesus
when
Christ.
This situation, it's pretty much rinse and repeat. Like, everything that happened in that summer of 2016-17 appears to be happening right now with Ross Taylor and T20 cricket. Which, if you're going to go to a Super Smash game, do your best to go to a game that Ross Taylor's batting, because he is going to be absolutely frothing for sixes. His strike rate, 178 in that Super Smash campaign. Ross Taylor was... his 2 games saw him 26th in total runs. And his strike rate, the 25 batsmen who had more runs than Ross Taylor, no one had a higher strike rate than Ross Taylor. So it appears to me that when Ross Taylor's feeling frisky and there's a bit of niggle, last time we had this, Ross Taylor just absolutely smacked it around in the Super Smash, and I think that might happen again. It's a strange one. I don't know what's doing there, but not like, I wouldn't say I'm super eager, excited to like dive into these T20 games against Pakistan. They'll be interesting, and we'll emerge from this with a bit more clarity on different players and what they're capable of doing. Jacob Duffy's been included in the first T20 ODI squad, so he's like a new player there, which is cool, good for him. But yeah, so this T20 series will be interesting when you view it like on the back of the T20 series against the West Indies, and trying to build that really hearty group of T20 players for the upcoming double dose of T20 World Cups. Do you have, like, what else is tickling your fancy in Kiwi cricket matters at the moment?
Well, just on the Todd Astle thing there, they've confused things because they've got replacement players effectively. They're not quite replacement players, but like the first game, there are 5 guys who are only playing that, are only in the squad for that first game because there are 5 test players coming back in 2 and 3. Jacob Duffy being one of them. So I hope he gets a game because he's definitely a guy who deserves it. And when you look at guys like Scott Kugelheim and Blair Tickner continually getting picked, where maybe the form isn't backing that up and they had an opportunity and didn't quite take it. I would like to see the next guy get it, like someone who is also in that same caliber of players, probably higher up than either of them too, actually, in terms of what he's achieved domestically over the last 2 or 3 years. Certainly want to see like the other guys on that level get opportunities before we go back to Kugelheim for a 4th or 5th time for it's just a little bit stink otherwise. But they've confused things by having Astle in the squad for all 3 games. But it seems like, just reading between the lines a little bit, when you consider Santner and Sodhi, dead set first 11 guys, played almost all of the games over the last 4 years. I think Sodhi missed one of the West Indies T20s, didn't he? They didn't want to pick him at Eden Park, but played bowled very well. Probably bowled a little bit better than Santner, actually. And if it was the 2 or 3 games in that series, it must have been 3. So the next 2, I think it must have been. You're not picking 3 spinners. You didn't even pick a single spinner in the Test series, so you're not going to pick 3 in 2020s. And there's different circumstances because you're not worried so much about conditions so much as you are about tactics, and you can actually bowl quite well defensively with spin bowling in New Zealand, even though you can't take wickets for it apparently. As far as just basing on the records of some of our spinners in New Zealand, they don't seem to take very many Test wickets, but they can at least lock up the ends. And in 2020 cricket, that's often all you need to do. And if you can do that, that will lead to wickets in its own way through scoreboard pressure. So spinners, the fact that spinners are being picked in the squad doesn't have to be like a hypocritical thing because they didn't pick a spinner in the Test stuff. But because of 3 spinners is a bit excessive, but presumably Astle will not play that first game when both Santner and Sodhi are available. He might be a good bet to come in for Santner in games 2 and 3, which game 1's at Eden Park, so maybe that'll get weird if they don't pick Sodhi again. But the next 2 are at Seddon Park and McLean Park, where you probably do want the 2 spinners, because you're not going to get a lot of anything out of McLean Park, so you might as well be able to bring in that extra guile of the spin bowling ideas, and Seddon Park will turn as much as anywhere, so that be shocked if they don't pick 2 spinners there. But presumably, Astle comes in for Santner in the games 2 and 3 if he plays. But as weird as that seems, because it doesn't make a whole lot of sense how Todd Astle's suddenly just back in contention. I would have thought that the point at which you retire from red ball cricket right as you were about to have an opportunity to be the number 1 Test spinner, I would have thought that shows just a difference in life priorities that doesn't necessarily match up with extended Black Caps opportunities going forward. I kind of would have thought that would be the point at which he's sort of... It's like a... You know how in the NBA they'll talk about the gentleman's sweep, where you're 3-0 down, but you win game 4 and then you lose game 5. So you don't get swept 4-0, but you basically did get swept. It's just the gentleman's sweep. So save a little bit of face involved. It sort of felt like the gentleman's retirement for Todd Astle. He's stepping out of red ball cricket, continuing to play over the summer with the white ball for Canterbury, but probably not expecting future Black Caps duties. Maybe that's not fair at all to him. Maybe he fully expected to be able to force his way into 2020 and ODI squads moving forward for the next several years. I don't know. Certainly hadn't closed the door on it, but that's kind of what it felt like. But just as odd as it is that he's just burst back into contention, apparently, and I still think he's got to have to do some incredible work to knock either Santner or Sodhi out of a regular squad. Maybe they're thinking because one of the T20s is in the T20 World Cups is in India, isn't it? So maybe you might actually want a 3rd spinner. I'm pretty sure when Santner and Sodhi bowled very well at the previous one that they had in India, Nathan McCullum was also with them. So perhaps that is part of the thinking. But then it doesn't have to be Todd Astle, and that's sort of the question I was wondering about. This is if not Todd Astle, who else actually because Todd Astle's been caught up in a lot of things that are unfair to him, with some inconsistent selections. So I don't want to make this sound like a personal attack on him or anything, because it's certainly not that. Who else actually would have been in contention though? Michael Rippon apparently is eligible, but he's not even like he's only just getting New Zealand A type consideration, let alone to be thrust into international cricket for New Zealand. That might seem a little bit fast for him. Maybe he needs a little bit more time refining the skill set for international cricket. I don't know, but like, who else actually would? Because this is the thing. This is why I stopped wondering about the Todd Astle selection, is because I started thinking like, well, who actually else could have been picked? Like, are there other spinners in white ball cricket who would be on those fringes?
There isn't really.
Yeah, so that was my thought too.
Oh, yeah, easy on. Because there is a very viable option that it fits everything, all of your perceptions, you as an individual, all of your perceptions about Black Caps T20 cricket. Will Somerville is the second best spinner in the Ford Trophy right now. I'll just chuck up his career record. He has, Will Somerville's bowled in the Big Bash League. Decent T20 bowling average of 32, not crazy, not terrible. But he did, Will Somerville kind of rose to prominence. He did play games for New South Wales, but his breakout moment, I guess, was bowling for the Sydney Sixers in the Big Bash League. So, if you just want a spinner, he can bat a little bit as well. He goes all right. Not too many of this Black Caps T20 team, obviously by circumstance, have played Big Bash League cricket. Will Somerville has played Big Bash League cricket. So if you're looking for third or fourth string options, which is what we're talking about with Todd Astle, Will Somerville has as good a case as Todd Astle, except for being Gary Stead's best friend in batting.
Yeah, the perception of the batting, because Somerville's not a terrible batsman. He can swing it a little bit, and Todd Astle is probably a little bit, he's not on the level of, say, Mitch Santner as an all-rounder, and Mitch Santner isn't exactly a full all-rounder either. He's definitely a bowler first. So, but Somerville would offer an extra, the off-spinning option is a point of difference too, which can't be counted out.
Yeah, because then you got Ish Sodhi bowling leg spin.
Exactly.
Mitchell Santner bowling left arm spin. Suddenly your off spinner is a different option. I was just thinking about Todd Astle's PR machine that he must have in operation, because holy shit. But the fun point here, Wildcard, again, I'm not putting too much weight or relevance on these tour games, right? With all due respect to your cricket coverage and your cricket discussions here with the Niche Case Wildcard, I consider myself to be the Kiwi cricket fellow, the Kiwi cricket chap.
For sure, absolutely.
And I am not in that position. I am not putting a whole lot of weight on these tour games against the West Indians. So if you're listening to this and you're a cricket fan, make of that what you will. I just think there's so many other circumstances and just life situations, whatever it is, the chaos that is New Zealand cricket from a selection, players going between different levels at the moment. I'm not, usually when you get a New Zealand A team, I'm tapped in. And that, I guess that's where I'm coming from, is usually I'm quite tapped in. Right now I just don't see how the New Zealand A tour games in the current context are that influential on wider cricket matters. What I'm more interested in is how those players reintegrate into Super Smash and reintegrate into Ford Trophy Plunkett Shield based off of their experience of playing at that level. All of that is to say, Rachin Ravindra is quite clearly the darling of New Zealand cricket. That is in a sense of he is the young player who is putting up the biggest numbers across different formats, and from a media perception, New Zealand cricket perspective, Rachin Ravindra is the dude that everyone is putting up on a pedestal. What is wrong with selecting Rachin Ravindra in this T20 squad? if we're looking forward to the next 2 years of T20 cricket, it just seems like a nice little opportunity, a nice little window to get Rachin Ravindra in, because he can obviously bat. Like, he opens the batting, and he just took 6 wickets in a long form game. Last year's Super Smash took a bunch of wickets, 8 wickets at 36. So he's like, we're not talking Ishodi Mitchell Santner. That's not what we're talking about. Again, we're talking about the 3rd or 4th tier of spin options. We're talking about Will Somerville, Todd Astle. You mentioned Michael Rippon. That's just the names we're working through here. Rachin Ravindra is part of that group. Like, he doesn't have amazing white ball stats to fall back on, but if we're just casting a gaze over New Zealand cricket and we're thinking, who's the 3rd best T20 spinner option? Who's someone we can integrate into this T20 setup, as they've done? Like, you've got an idea that the T20 team is a kind of a stomping ground, a proving ground for these young cricketers. Like, there's Mark Chapman still in the... I just close tabs and then I have to open them again. It's quite frustrating. You've got like...
Right-click, reopen last tab. It's a lifesaver for me every single week.
Like, you've got like Jacob Duffy comes in as a young player, gets his first crack in T20 cricket. Mark Chapman's there. Blair Tickner's still there. Scott Kugelheim. Like, these players are being integrated into Black Caps cricket through T20 cricket, which is what you've stated for a while now. Like, why isn't Rachin Ravindra considered in that? When he's, like, pretty clearly the best younger cricketer in New Zealand right now. Any format. Whatever format you want to throw, the most consistent player across all 3 formats of the younger bracket is Rachin Ravindra. So, like, when we're talking about that 3rd or 4th spinner all-rounder, because obviously Todd Astle was selected for his all-round abilities, surely Rachin Ravindra has to be considered.
His is a really fascinating case for all those reasons, because he's definitely been brought along, like, by the selectors in a way which, like, a lot of guys, like Jacob Duffy's probably a good example of someone who's, what would he be, like 26 or something now, who's been working very hard, playing sort of outside of the spotlight as well for Otago, an Otago team that hasn't been at its best in the last few years. Like, generally got the lowest number of New Zealand representatives coming out of there at the moment, and like, even when they did have big old Neil Wagner bursting through, he goes and moves to Northern Districts. So, like, it's a little bit of an unglamorous way to be on the come up for Jacob Duffy, and he's had to sort of pay a lot of dues to get there. Rachin Ravindra sort of came through as one of the stars of his under-19s crop, and has kind of been given a helping hand along, playing a lot of these, basically all of these New Zealand A games, basically, even when that's reflected in his form for selection, and when it's not reflected, because his Plunket Shield stats at the start of the year were absolutely shocking. He was probably the 2nd worst opener over the first half of the season, behind Sean Solier, who himself was like a converted opener in a new situation for him. Having said that, like, he's scored some good runs since then in the New Zealand A stuff, and he just had a huge game that you mentioned against West Indies, where, like, it's not a surprise that he scores an unbeaten 100 in that game. Strike rate at 82 as well, which is impressive, because he hasn't always been like the quickest scorer in some of these examples. It's not so much that, because we've seen he is clearly a capable batsman, and he is early in his career, and he is working through some of these things that you got to work through before you find that consistency as a first-class cricketer leading into international cricket, etc., etc. What's interesting is that he batted at 6 to score his 144 not out. Glenn Phillips and Tim Seifert opening the batting. Surprise, like, definitely a surprise. You would have thought Ravindra and Seifert would be the other way around. You might not have even expected Phillips to be opening. It's a little bit of a odd one as to what they might have been thinking. But then he comes through and takes 6 for 80 odd with the ball as well. He was playing in a Mitchell Santner role in this game, wasn't he? Like, and lower down in the batting order, in the middle order to where you're like in an all-rounders role, and then bowling, I think, more overs than anyone else did in that one. He didn't, none for 56 in the first innings, so not a massive amount there. But I mean, like, that second innings, where are we? 19.3 overs. Ish Sodhi only bowled 6 overs. Scott Kugelheim only bowled 6 overs. Blair Tickner 14. Doug Bracewell 10 overs. Like, he was, I guess, when you start taking wickets, you just stay on and keep taking wickets. You stay on even longer when you're a spin bowler. You don't have to worry about, like, the short over spell type things. You just keep rolling the arm over. So there's probably a little bit of momentum that leads into that. But this happened as him playing in a role which clearly was meant to emphasize his spin bowling a little bit more, his potential as maybe even an all-rounder. He's, again, like that, I think he had a first-class average of like a triple figures as a bowler coming into this season. He's taken a few wickets, so he's probably, and obviously this one would have really dragged that way down. But he's been a guy who passes the eye test without necessarily passing the stat test a lot. It's just quite interesting to see that, and that's not like a problem. That's just normal young player, first-class cricket. You like, clearly he's going to get there. That's not the issue. It's just like, yeah, maybe, I don't know. That thing about like getting the helping hand, he's definitely been pulled along quite far. They're definitely investing a lot in him. So there's belief, which makes him just like, he's a dead set black cap. There's no doubt about it. He's going to get opportunities. Just quite interesting to see him being given that sort of like, because it is almost like a bit of a get in where you fit in type of things. The same way that Tom Blundell became a test match opener, or BJ Watling became a wicketkeeper, or, you know, a few of these different situations where they've just maybe tinkered, Will Young as well, opening the batting, like, just tinkered with things a little bit, specifically in the New Zealand A stuff, which we know is a precursor to Black Cap selection. It's just interesting to see what that might mean for his career, because he has been an opening batsman who could bowl a little bit, and here they picked him, taking the pressure off him as an opener, where he has been a little inconsistent, and as you would expect for someone at his age, I don't know that there'd be any other openers around the Plunket Shield consistently playing every week at his age. I can't think of anyone off the top of my head. There's a few sort of 23, 24 range maybe, I don't know. I'd have to look that up though. It's just interesting to see him used in that role where he was playing as an actual all-rounder, which is an emphasis on his bowling, actually, which we haven't really seen, but I mean, emphasis on bowling has been a point that Gavin Larson's made many times. You remember when they gave Mark Chapman a little bit of a go in the 2020 team for a while, and then he fell back out when other guys came back in contention, and Gavin Larson specifically said, like, well, you know, it'd be interesting if he worked on his bowling and gave us that little option as well, which is a stupid way to be thinking about how to select players, but it is another tool in the toolkit, so it's worth, if you're Mark Chapman, it's certainly worth figuring that out. Glenn Phillips has suddenly become a little bit of a half-decent off-spinner over the last 12 months, and Michael Bracewell bowled a few overs in this New Zealand A game as well. It's a factor that is not one that we can sleep on, because it's so consistent with the way that the Black Cap selection has been in recent times. So just seeing Rachin Ravindra getting a bit of an emphasis on his bowling as well, and to bat in the middle order, maybe that really is an avenue for him into international cricket, at least to start with, and then, you know, with an eye on maybe being a test match opener down the line. But how do we get to that point? Well, maybe there's a bridge we can cross to get to there, which is him. Why not chuck him into the 2020 stuff? Maybe not this series, obviously not this series. Maybe that would have been a bit too soon, but after having had a summer playing for Wellington, where he might be able to work on his little left arm tweakers a little bit more. I don't know. It's another option which hasn't necessarily been open in the past, and suddenly through this New Zealand A, like, this is the only kind of stuff you can really take out of the New Zealand A stuff, is looking at wider patterns, because especially at the moment, like, someone's going to score 100. It doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be playing Black Caps soon, because just the standard of these games doesn't seem like it's been very high. The intensity of these games certainly doesn't seem like it's been very high. But what we do get at least is a glimpse into selection, like who's in the next tier talent. What kind of roles are people being looked at for Phillips and Seifert to both be opening in this game is kind of a curious one as well. So it's little things like that which are clues, maybe not so much as to the game themselves, but just into a wider context. And Ravinder is part of that as well. So I was already following fairly closely what he was doing anyway, but it'd be interesting to see if that's something that flows into what he does in Super Smash for. Even though we're talking about a 4-day game here, it would be interesting to see if that's something that maybe is unlocked a bit in Super Smash and maybe some 4 trophy stuff, and who knows down the line over the rest of the summer.
That sets up like a pretty interesting Super Smash. Like it's a niggly competition that we've highlighted a couple weird things about, but when we're thinking about the New Zealand T20 team, and given the absolute shambles that is the selection for this Pakistan series, it just amplifies the excitement around Super Smash performances for me as someone who's going to like organize those performances and highlight different performances. So I'd say the Super Smash is going to be way more interesting than this fucking weird T20 series against Pakistan. Final question, Wildcard. Well, we can do this by games. We can do this by overs. Maybe both. What number are you putting games and overs for Todd Astle in this T20 series? He's named in both squads. One of the few cricketers to get that luxury of being selected in both squads. What are you like? Is it better to go with overs? What's your over-under on overs? Or do you want to go games? I reckon overs is a bit more interesting. Overs bold.
Kane Williamson is the captain in games 2 and 3, right? I closed my tab.
Yes, he is. So Todd Astle won't be right. He won't be bowling in those games.
No, exactly. Yeah, so I was going to say. And I don't think he'll be bowling in game 1 because it's at Eden Park. Mitchell Santner's captain. Ish Sodhi will be the next man up. You're not going to pick him ahead of Sodhi, who bowled quite well in the last series, and has been one of our best 2020 bowlers for several years. Same with Mitchell Santner. Like, there's a clear hierarchy there. Don't think he plays game 1, therefore. I think he might get into the team. Oh, and at least one of the... I reckon he'll play the 3rd game. I think he'll play at McLean Park, and I think he'll bowl 1 over.
1 over? Holy crikey, yeah.
Well, Kane Williamson's not going to give him a go, and we'll probably bat first and then bowl them out with it. But like Baba Azam's not even playing this series, so there goes their best batsman. There's no Lockie Ferguson, is there? He's injured and hopefully not too badly injured, but that didn't sound fantastic with the diagnosis they gave him. But like, where are we? Jamison, Southey, Bolt, probably take a fair few wickets. I don't know. I'm going to stick with 1 over. I'll say he'll bowl 1 over in the series because I think he'll only play 1 game.
1 over in the series, 1 game.
They're going to have at least 6 bowling options too.
He bowls like going back to the infamous series against India 2 summers ago. Todd Astle selected and got a, what would you call it? You used the gentlemanly sweep term before. He got like a gentlemanly 7 overs. A consequential, maybe, I don't know. He got gifted 7 overs of meaningless ODI bowling in that series by Kane Williamson. So he played 2 games and he bowled 7 overs. So
it's like getting socks for Christmas, eh? It's like it's handy, it's useful, but it's not really what I was hoping for.
Yeah, or the guy in your cricket team who sucks, but you feel sorry for him, so you give him a couple of 7 overs,
a little bit harsh.
7 overs, 2 games. It does kind of weasel down to 1 game, 1 over, so that's good. I'm going to go. The over under is 3 for overs, so he's going to bowl less than 3 overs. Just whether they come in 1 game or stretched out across the 3 games will be interesting to see. I'm just realizing like how many players like Tom Bruce, he's just gone. He's just gone into the domestic abyss. Matt Henry, someone to watch out for in the Super Smash because he's not a factor as well. So, I don't.
Hamish Bennett,
he's gone. He fell over too many times. So,
a couple too many beamers.
But he was listed in that T20 squad announcement. He was listed as being injured. So it was literally Ross Taylor was the only player who was like dropped.
Unbelievable! I didn't see that. I only saw the list on the TV coverage. So, and then I looked it up on one of the the news websites to see it just now. But that's I don't know what to say about that. That's ridiculous. That's one extra. It's even worse than I ranted about before. It's just another little bloody knife in the coffin there, or nail in the coffin is the phrase, isn't it? Knife in the back / nail in the coffin.
Yeah, what? Well, the second knife in the back.
Yeah, another one. He's got a scar from the other year.
He got shanked in the back. Oh my gosh. So one of New Zealand's best ever cricketers was the only player to be dropped in a squad announcement where like 20 players were named and 5 or 6 are coming in and out for various reasons. But the only player dropped was Ross Taylor. So I don't know. I'm pretty excited to write about that tomorrow. So I'm excited, and I'm excited to end this podcast. So we'll finish it there. Sun shining. The Aotearoas are in full blossom, and New Zealand cricket and the Black Caps are they're confusing, but it's also beautiful, but it's also confusing. And then there's also a bit of excitement and annoyance. So it's a Kiwi summer. It's just another Kiwi summer, and we're happy to be here.